Thank you, Mr. President and members. There's not a lot of issues that I can say that I agree with my colleague and friend from San Francisco, but I do stand in support of this bill. And there are some names I'd like to mention that are probably meaningless to this floor. Charlene Friedman, my mother. Virginia Friedman, my grandmother. Both of them died from the sequelae of cancer of the lung. My friend Alan Kleinberg, a jeweler. My friend Nacho, a landscaper, dropped dead at 50 years old at a property adjacent to mine in the beautiful Temecula wine country. And I remember as a child driving to my grandparents' house from our home in Orange County and hearing on the news that a gentleman by the name of Nat King Cole died. And it said that he died from lung cancer from cigarette smoking. And I heard that as my mother was driving the car and smoking. And I said to my mother at a very young age, I said, "Mom, smoking kills. Why are you smoking?" And she goes, "Well, it's a horrible habit. It's very hard to break." So what my relatives didn't have at the time that they became addicted to smoking, when it was culturally acceptable, it was very in vogue to smoke at that time, no one knew about the dangers of cigarette smoke and the emphysema that it causes, the asthma that it causes, and more devastatingly, the cancer that it causes. Even with the warnings that we put on cigarette cartons every day that smoking is hazardous to your health, it will cause cancer, we still have millions of people, 40 million in the United States, that are still addicted to tobacco. Nationwide, more than 20 million adults, not even counting the children, that's 1 in 10 adults in this country, have tried e-cigarettes. And e-cigarette companies have been able to pander the nicotine products without the prohibitions that have been placed on tobacco companies, where you don't see their advertisements on television, radio, or billboards. And we're seeing celebrities now sensationalizing and looking cool, advertising vaping products. And don't think for a moment that they're not being marketed to our children with such flavors as cotton candy, tutti frutti. They're going after kids. And that's where I have to draw the line from being a healthcare professional and being a politician. After years with the help of the American Lung Association, the American Cancer Society, and educating people about the morbidity and mortality associated with cigarette smoking, we are beginning to see yet a new generation of nicotine addiction via vaping that I believe, as many do, can be a gateway to getting back to traditional smoking of cigarettes. And we made a lot of progress, my friends. From 1965 to 2011, we saw a decline in tobacco use among adults and high school students from 42.5% to 18.5% due to advertising bans and strong education programs. All that progress potentially is going to be reduced. As we've heard, tobacco use remains the largest preventable cause of disease and premature death in the United States, yet more than 45 million Americans, as I said before, are still addicted to these products. Unfortunately, only 4 to 7% of those people that have the habit can quit without some type of nicotine replacement medication or vaping. So I do say that I think vaping is a tool that can potentially help one stop smoking, but it is not without risk. The World Health Organization issued a report that said it issued grave concerns over the growing role of multinational tobacco companies, warning that they could turn e-cigarettes into a gateway for a new generation of smokers at a time when the decades-long public health campaign has successfully reduced smoking rates in the United States and other developed countries. Also, the Centers for Disease Control in 2014 reported that more than 250,000 youth who have never smoked a cigarette used e-cigarettes in 2013, 3 times the number that was used in 2011. I'm very pleased that in the new legislation that nicotine containers now will be child-resistant, child-proof, because there have been numerous reports of young children and infants being taken to emergency rooms that die from nicotine toxicity because these solutions are concentrated. I want to thank Senator Hill for bringing that forward in his original bill. My friends, there are 466 brands, there are 7,764 flavors, and it's a $7 billion industry now in the United States. And we don't even know when you get these bottles truly how much nicotine is in those products, and we're talking about something that can be potentially very dangerous. But again, it took decades for us to understand the hazards of cigarette smoke that my mother and my grandmother didn't have the opportunity to embrace. And today we have these nicotine devices that aerosolize nicotine as well as other excipient ingredients that, when aerosolized and heated up, produce potentially carcinogenic materials. The bottom line is that we have to do a lot more studies to positively say that the formaldehyde that's created, the acetaldehyde that's created, the acrolein that's created is in an abundance enough to cause cancer. However, there are studies that have been underway. One at UCLA by Dr. Steve DeBonnet, a UCLA pulmonologist who actually took cells from the bronchial and put them in petri dishes and exposed those cells, those human cells, to tobacco smoke. And then he exposed those cells to vapor. And the results were frightening. The cells that were there that were exposed to smoke had a higher propensity, a higher rate of division. And when cells uncontrollably divide fast, that's what is called tumors. And he got the same results from the vaping, which leads us to believe that there is potentially a link to nicotine and all the aerosolized ingredients that haven't been tested to causing potentially morbidity and mortality. We're putting those warning signs out there today so that we can protect a younger generation from not having the demise of my prior generations. As a pharmacist, I can tell you we studied nicotine pharmacology, and we know for sure that it increases blood pressure, it increases heart rate, it increases hardening of the arteries. This is all scientific. It increases cholesterol in the blood. Needless to say, nicotine is not the safest chemical that's out there. And there is nicotine in other foods. You can find it in eggplant, but there is no concentration as high as you find in tobacco, and that's where nicotine that goes into these bottles comes from. And nicotine is very addictive. It is just addictive as heroin or cocaine, and this is why it is so difficult for people to abate these sensations. The CDC reports that a percentage of United States middle and high school students who use e-cigarettes more than doubled in 2011 and 12, from 4.7% to 10%. In 2012, more than 1.78 million middle school and high school students nationwide tried e-cigarettes. It's probably larger today with the sensationalistic advertising that we see. My friends, we need to get ahead of this public safety nightmare. We need stronger education, and I believe that we should be classifying these devices, nicotine in these bottles, in the same category as tobacco products, the place where nicotine is originated from. Let's not repeat history. Let's put information out there, and let's protect our kids and make sure they know the hazards, they know the possibility of death in getting addicted to this horrific chemical, to these horrific products that can severely diminish one's quality of life. I urge you to please vote for this bill. Please vote aye.